6 Buddhist Lessons on Overcoming Fear and Living a Life of Peace. Welcome to Buddhist Stories, where timeless wisdom meets modern-day challenges. Whether you're new to Buddhism or have been practicing for years, you're in the right place to explore profound teachings that can transform the way we approach fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by fear? The kind of fear that paralyzes your decisions, clouds your thinking, and traps you in a cycle of worry? Perhaps it's the fear of the unknown, of failure, or even the fear of losing something you hold dear. But what if I told you that fear doesn't have to control you? What if I told you that fear is not something to fight, but something to understand, observe, and transcend? Sounds intriguing, right? What if the key to overcoming fear is not in resisting it, but in accepting it? Could this ancient wisdom be the missing link to living a life filled with peace, courage, and freedom? In today's video, we are going to dive deep into how Buddhist teachings can transform our relationship with fear by embracing mindfulness, understanding impermanence, letting go of attachment, and cultivating patience. These powerful teachings can help us release the fears that hold us back and pave the way for a life rooted in wisdom, resilience, and inner peace. But you may wonder, is it really possible to live without fear? In a world where so much is uncertain and unpredictable, how can we be free from the grip of fear? Don't worry, I'm here to show you how simple yet profound shifts in your mindset, inspired by Buddhist philosophy, can shift your experience of fear from one of struggle to one of acceptance and peace. Stay with me, and I promise you that what we explore today will not only challenge how you think about fear but also provide you with practical tools to live a life more grounded in courage, compassion, and freedom. Fear doesn't have to be the enemy, it can become the very path to your awakening. So, are you ready to discover how Buddhist wisdom can transform your fears into opportunities for growth? Let's begin this journey together, one step at a time. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want more videos on how to live a peaceful, fearless life, filled with purpose and joy. Let's begin our journey together. I embrace impermanence, a path to freedom from fear. In the teachings of the Buddha, one of the most profound concepts is impermanence, or anicca, which reveals the fundamental truth of life. Everything is in constant flux. Nothing stays the same. This includes not just the external world, the trees, the rivers, the seasons, but also the internal world of our emotions, thoughts, and even our fears. Imagine, for a moment, the power of this truth. Everything changes. That single realization has the potential to free us from the chains of attachment and fear, enabling us to live with more peace, clarity, and ease. This truth is as simple as it is profound. Yet, as human beings, we often resist change. We long for stability, for things to remain fixed, secure, and unchanging. Our attachments to relationships, jobs, and health create deep fears of loss, of failure, of the unknown. These fears become the soil from which our anxieties grow. However, the Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, teaches us a different way to relate to our lives and fears. The nature of impermanence. The Buddhist teachings on impermanence invite us to look at life from a new perspective. The truth is that nothing in this world is permanent. Relationships, career achievements, the health of our body, everything is subject to change. In fact, the very essence of life is that it is always in flux. The seasons change, the tides ebb and flow, and our emotions come and go like the clouds in the sky. In the same way that we cannot hold on to a wave once it has passed, we cannot cling to anything in this world, be it a joyful moment or a painful experience. Everything changes. This is not a truth that should bring despair, but rather, it should bring us relief. When we understand that everything is transient, we begin to let go of the fear of losing something. Instead of holding on to things, we begin to live in the present moment, appreciating the beauty and fleeting nature of life. Imagine for a moment, if we could truly let go of our attachment to outcomes, our desire for everything to stay the same, how much lighter would we feel? How much less fear would we carry in our hearts? The truth of impermanence allows us to find peace in the midst of change. We stop fearing what we cannot control. We stop fearing that things will fall apart. Because we know that everything is always changing, and that includes our fears. A Buddhist story, finding peace amidst change. There is a famous story about a monk who had spent many years meditating under a particular tree, a sacred place where he had deepened his spiritual practice. This tree, to him, was more than just a shelter. It was a symbol of stability, a place where he found peace amidst the chaos of life. One day, a violent storm swept through the area, and lightning struck the tree, setting it on fire. In an instant, the sacred place of meditation was gone. This event could have been a cause for despair, anger, or frustration, but the monk, instead of reacting with these emotions, smiled serenely and said, "This too shall pass." The monk understood the nature of impermanence, and in that understanding, he found freedom. He knew that no matter how painful or disappointing the loss, it would not last forever. This too was temporary. The same wisdom applies to us when we face challenges, loss, or fear. Life is constantly changing, and by accepting this, we free ourselves from the grip of fear. When we encounter loss or hardship, we must remember that nothing is permanent. Both our pain and joy are temporary. By practicing this understanding of impermanence, we start to relax into life instead of resisting it. A personal reflection, the power of letting go. As we move through life, we encounter moments of difficulty, just like the monk did with the loss of his tree. The difference between those who suffer and those who find peace lies in how they relate to change. If we spend our time trying to hold on to something, whether it's a person, a material possession, or a moment of happiness, we create a sense of insecurity. We fear losing what we have, and this fear only intensifies our suffering. When we embrace the concept of impermanence, we begin to let go of the need to control everything around us. For example, think about a time when you experienced intense fear about a future event, perhaps a job interview, an important exam, or a relationship issue. At the time, the fear felt overwhelming, didn't it? But in hindsight, you might see that the event came and went, and it didn't turn out as badly as you had imagined. This is the power of impermanence at work. The fear you felt was temporary. The same will hold true for any challenge you face in the future. This understanding gives us the freedom to experience life without clinging to any one moment. We can enjoy the joy of success without fearing it will disappear, and we can face loss with grace, knowing it too will eventually pass. This understanding allows us to stop wasting energy on worrying about the future or lamenting the past, and instead, focus on the present moment. Learning to let go. Practical steps. In Buddhism, we are encouraged to reflect regularly on the nature of impermanence. We do this through meditation, mindfulness, and contemplation. The Buddha taught us to observe the world around us and recognize the constant change. One of the simplest ways to start embracing impermanence is to observe the natural cycles of life. Look at the changing of the seasons, the growth and decay of plants, the ebb and flow of the tides. These cycles are powerful reminders that everything in life is temporary. Similarly, we can practice mindfulness by paying attention to the thoughts and feelings that arise within us. Often, we fear our emotions will overwhelm us or that they will last forever. But when we bring mindfulness to our emotional experiences, we realize that even our most intense feelings are transient. Anger, sadness, fear, these emotions all arise, and then they pass. Another way to practice impermanence is through meditation on anicca. the Buddhist concept of impermanence. During meditation, focus on the changing nature of all things. Watch how your breath rises and falls, how thoughts come and go. Reflect on how everything you experience is in a state of constant change. This practice helps us build the understanding that we are not our emotions, our thoughts, or our circumstances. We are simply the observer, and as we observe, we begin to let go of the need to control. Letting go of fear, the key to freedom. Fear often arises when we resist change. We fear losing something we love, or we fear the unknown. But the truth is, fear itself is impermanent. Just like joy and sadness, fear comes and goes. The key to overcoming fear is to stop fighting it. Instead of resisting fear, we must acknowledge it and let it pass through us. When we accept fear as a natural part of life, it no longer has power over us. Let's take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you felt fear? How long did it last? Was it as intense as you thought it would be? The fear you felt was not permanent, just as the fear you might feel in the future won't last forever. By embracing impermanence, we free ourselves from the cycle of worry and anxiety. We no longer need to control outcomes or cling to things that are fleeting. Call to action. Start embracing impermanence today. As you reflect on the teachings of impermanence, I invite you to take action. Begin by noticing the small moments of change in your life. Observe how the seasons shift, how your thoughts change throughout the day, and how your emotions come and go. Allow these moments of change to remind you that nothing is fixed. Nothing lasts forever. Start by letting go of one thing today, perhaps a fear, an attachment, or a worry. Trust that whatever it is, it will pass. By letting go, you will begin to experience the freedom that comes with embracing impermanence. Remember, both joy and suffering are temporary. Embrace the present moment with open arms, knowing that everything, including your fear, will change. The next time you feel overwhelmed by fear, remember the words of the monk, "This too shall pass." And know, in the depth of your heart, that you have the power to navigate the changes of life with grace and peace. 2. Seeing the illusion of fear, embracing the true nature of our mind. Fear. It grips us when we least expect it, clouding our judgment and filling our hearts with unease. It can be so intense, so real, that it feels like an undeniable fact. But what if I told you that fear, like all the other emotions we experience, is a creation of the mind? What if, by understanding this truth, you could free yourself from its suffocating hold? This is what the Buddha taught us, that fear, like many of our emotional experiences, is an illusion, a thought created by the mind. By seeing fear for what it truly is, we can begin to release its power and live with greater peace and clarity. In the Buddhist path, understanding the nature of fear is a pivotal step toward liberation. It is not just about suppressing fear or pushing it away, it's about seeing it clearly, recognizing it as it is, and letting go of the attachment to it. The Buddhist teachings on the mind and its illusions offer profound insights into how we can navigate fear with wisdom and compassion. Fear as an illusion, the nature of the mind. At the heart of Buddhism is the idea that the mind is the source of much of our suffering. This is expressed in the Buddha's famous teaching, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." Our minds are incredibly powerful. They shape our perceptions of the world and color every experience we have. The problem arises when we believe everything our mind tells us, without question or inquiry. Fear is one of the most pervasive illusions created by the mind. It often emerges as a reaction to imagined threats, things that have not yet happened, and may never happen at all. The mind is constantly creating scenarios, projecting potential dangers, and weaving stories that exaggerate the risks we face. It is this tendency to imagine the worst-case scenario that keeps us locked in fear. The Buddha taught that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that observes them. When we start to see thoughts, especially fear-based thoughts, as mere phenomena passing through the mind, we begin to loosen their grip. We realize that fear, while it may feel real in the moment, is not an objective truth. It is an illusion, a mental construct that fades away once we acknowledge it. The illusion of fear in action. Consider, for a moment, a situation that many of us have experienced, standing at the edge of a cliff, feeling our hearts race, palms sweating, and our minds racing with the thought of falling. In that moment, fear is overwhelming. We might think, what if I fall? What if I lose control? But here's the crucial point. At that moment, we are not falling. We are not in danger. What we are experiencing is the fear of something that has not yet happened. This is the essence of fear. It is often based on something that doesn't exist in the present moment. It exists only in our imagination, in the what-ifs of our minds. And yet, in that moment, it feels very real. This is the power of the mind. It can create a reality that feels tangible, even when it is not. The moment we realize that we are not in danger, that the fear we are experiencing is an illusion, we begin to shift our perception. The Buddha once spoke about how our minds often create these monsters of fear. He compared them to shadows that grow larger the more we focus on them. In the darkness of the night, a small tree branch may appear as a looming figure. But the more we approach it, the more we realize it was only a shadow. Fear works in the same way. The more we focus on it, the larger and more overwhelming it becomes. But the moment we shine the light of awareness on it, we realize it is simply a shadow, something that exists only in our minds. A Buddhist story, The Man in the Burning House. The Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, often used stories to illustrate profound truths. One such story is the parable of the man trapped in a burning house. In this story, a man is inside his house, unaware that a fire is consuming the structure. As the fire grows, he becomes increasingly afraid, imagining that the house will collapse at any moment. His mind is consumed with fear, projecting scenarios of disaster and doom. Yet, as he looks around, he begins to see that the house is not as solid as it appears. The walls are crumbling, the beams are weak, and the foundation is not as secure as he thought. Despite the fear gripping him, the man is able to remain calm. He sees the fire for what it is, an illusion of permanence. The house, just like the fear in his mind, is not as solid as it seemed. The fire, too, will burn out, and the house will eventually collapse. The key lesson here is that fear often arises when we perceive something as solid and unchangeable. Yet, just as the burning house is not as permanent as it seems, neither is the fear we feel. This story is a powerful reminder that our fears are often based on the belief that things will never change, that they are permanent. But nothing is permanent. Just as the house will eventually burn down, our fears will eventually pass. The moment we recognize this, we can begin to loosen our attachment to fear and embrace the transient nature of all things. The power of awareness, seeing fear clearly. The practice of mindfulness is central to overcoming fear. When we bring mindfulness to our fears, we begin to see them for what they truly are: thoughts and feelings passing through our minds. Mindfulness allows us to step back and observe our fears without becoming entangled in them. Rather than reacting impulsively to fear, we can create space between ourselves and the fear, allowing us to respond with clarity and wisdom. One of the most powerful practices in Buddhism is the cultivation of right view, which involves seeing things as they truly are. This means recognizing that our fears, anxieties, and worries are not objective truths, but subjective experiences created by the mind. When we see this clearly, we no longer have to be controlled by our fears. Instead, we can approach them with curiosity and compassion. In Buddhist meditation, practitioners often focus on the breath or on the sensations in the body to ground themselves in the present moment. When fear arises, this mindfulness practice allows us to notice the sensations of fear without identifying with them. We become aware of the tightness in our chest, the racing heart, or the swirling thoughts. But we do not become consumed by them. Instead, we acknowledge them, let them be, and allow them to pass. Practical steps to seeing fear as an illusion. To begin seeing fear as an illusion, we must first recognize that fear often arises from our mind's tendency to imagine worst-case scenarios. It is helpful to practice the following steps to shift our perception. 1. Pause and breathe. The first step when fear arises is to pause and take a few deep breaths. This helps to calm the nervous system and bring us back to the present moment. When we are present, we can see that the fear is not based on reality, but on imagination. To observe the fear, instead of reacting to the fear, we can observe it with curiosity. Notice where you feel the fear in your body. Is it tightness in the chest? A knot in the stomach? A racing heart? By observing the fear without judgment, we begin to create space between ourselves and it. 3. Question the fear. Ask yourself, is this fear based on something real, or is it something my mind has created? Often, when we question our fears, we realize that they are not based on facts, but on our perceptions of what might happen in the future. 4. Recognize the temporary nature of fear. Fear, like all emotions, is temporary. It rises, peaks, and eventually fades away. By remembering that fear is transient, we can stop attaching to it and allow it to pass. 5. Cultivate compassion. Instead of judging ourselves for feeling fear, we can approach it with compassion. Understand that fear is a natural human experience. By treating ourselves with kindness, we reduce the power that fear has over us. A call to action: free yourself from the illusion of fear. As you reflect on the teachings of the Buddha, I invite you to take action. Begin by observing your own fears. When fear arises, pause and notice it. Rather than reacting with anxiety or worry, take a deep breath and remind yourself that fear is just a thought, a passing cloud in the sky of your mind. Ask yourself, is this fear real, or is it an illusion? Recognize that the fear you feel is not an objective truth, but a mental construct. When you see it for what it truly is, you will begin to loosen its grip. Remember, fear is not something to fight against. It is simply a thought in your mind, a shadow that grows larger when you focus on it. Shine the light of awareness on it, and it will dissipate. By embracing the impermanent nature of fear, you can live with greater peace, clarity, and freedom. The next time fear arises in your life, remember this: you are not your fear. You are the awareness that observes it. You have the power to see fear as an illusion and free yourself from its control. Embrace this wisdom, and you will find the strength to move through life with greater courage and wisdom. 3. Mindfulness, embracing the present moment to overcome fear. In the teachings of the Buddha, mindfulness or sati is considered one of the most essential practices on the path to awakening. Mindfulness means being fully present in each moment, cultivating an awareness of everything around you, and, most importantly, the awareness of your own thoughts, emotions, and sensations. At the heart of mindfulness is the ability to bring yourself into the present, freeing your mind from the worries of the past and the fears of the future. Fear, as we know it, often finds its roots in the past or future. We are either reliving past traumas, reliving painful memories that have long passed, or worrying about what may or may not happen in the future. Mindfulness teaches us to break free from this cycle, grounding us firmly in the present, allowing us to release the grip of fear and anxiety. It helps us recognize fear when it arises, without becoming entangled in it. We can pause, observe it, and then respond from a place of awareness rather than reactivity. This is the practice that allows us to cultivate peace amidst the storm, to remain steady when faced with the turbulence of life, and to act from a place of wisdom instead of fear. Mindfulness is not just a technique, it is a way of living, an art of being fully present to every moment, however fleeting, however challenging. When practiced diligently, it transforms our relationship with fear, allowing us to see it for what it truly is, a passing thought that does not define us. Understanding mindfulness in the context of Buddhism. The Buddha's teachings on mindfulness are not simply about paying attention to the present moment but about developing a deep, embodied awareness of all aspects of our experience. This practice is rooted in the four foundations of mindfulness, which focus on mindfulness of the body, feelings, the mind, and mental objects. It is through these layers of awareness that we begin to develop a stable and clear mind, one that is not tossed around by the winds of fear, doubt, and distraction. Mindfulness teaches us that fear is often a mental construct, something created by our minds through our attachment to past experiences or future uncertainties. It is easy to fall into a pattern of negative thinking, where we imagine worst-case scenarios or replay past mistakes over and over again. However, mindfulness enables us to break this cycle by helping us stay anchored in the present moment, where fear loses its power. Fear, by nature, is often a projection of our mind. We fear what might happen rather than what is actually happening. In this sense, fear is never truly real. It is simply a story that the mind creates, one that may or may not ever come true. When we are truly present, we see this illusion for what it is. And in that moment, we can release it, allowing peace to fill the space once occupied by fear. The Buddha's teaching on mindfulness and fear. The Buddha taught many valuable lessons about the nature of fear. And one of the most profound teachings comes from a simple encounter between the Buddha and a young monk. The monk was troubled by fears and anxieties about the future, unsure of what lay ahead. His mind was filled with what-if thoughts of possible dangers, failures, and disappointments. One day, this young monk went to the Buddha, seeking wisdom. With a troubled expression, he said, "I am afraid of what might happen in the future. I cannot shake these fears, and they make me anxious and restless." The Buddha, with his gentle yet profound wisdom, asked the monk, "What is the nature of your fear?" The monk replied, "I am afraid of the future, of things that may happen, and the suffering that may come." The Buddha, observing the young monk with compassion, asked him, "Are you present in this moment?" The monk nodded, but the Buddha pressed further, "Then your fear is not in the present moment, it is in your mind. Fear arises from the thoughts of the future, not from what is happening right now. Can you truly know the future? Can you say with certainty what will happen next?" The monk, realizing the depth of the Buddha's teaching, understood that his fears were illusions of the mind, projections into a future that had not yet arrived. He was consumed by worries about the future, neglecting the present moment where he could find peace. The lesson of the Buddha, mindfulness in the present moment. In this story, the Buddha points us to a crucial teaching: fear exists in the future or the past, but it does not exist in the present moment. The present moment is the only moment that is truly real, and it is the only moment in which we can experience peace. By practicing mindfulness, we can break free from the cycle of fear that resides in the past or future. Mindfulness allows us to bring our attention to the present moment where we can observe our fears, acknowledge them, and let them go. We can see fear as just a passing thought, not something that controls us or defines us. Fear may arise, but it does not need to rule our lives. In this sense, mindfulness is a powerful antidote to fear. When we become present to what is happening right now, we realize that there is nothing to fear. We are safe, we are whole, and we are capable of handling whatever comes our way. Practical applications of mindfulness. 1. Mindfulness of the breath. One of the simplest and most effective ways to practice mindfulness is through mindful breathing. The breath is always present, always with us, and it can serve as an anchor to bring us back to the present moment. When fear arises, we can take a deep breath and feel the sensation of the air entering and leaving our body. This simple act of awareness can help us ground ourselves in the present, preventing the mind from spiraling into anxious thoughts. 2. Mindfulness of sensations. Another way to practice mindfulness is by paying attention to the physical sensations in our body. Fear often manifests physically: tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, tension in the shoulders. When we become aware of these sensations, we can acknowledge them without judgment, allowing them to pass naturally. Mindfulness teaches us that these physical sensations are not permanent. They arise and fade away like waves on the shore. 3. Mindfulness of thoughts. Fear is often rooted in our thoughts. We may have a thought that says, "What if something bad happens?" or "I'm not good enough to handle this." These thoughts are not facts, they are simply mental fabrications. Mindfulness allows us to observe these thoughts without becoming attached to them. When a fearful thought arises, we can simply notice it, label it as fear, and let it go, rather than allowing it to control us. 4. Mindfulness in daily life. Mindfulness is not just something to practice on a meditation cushion, it is a way of living. You can practice mindfulness in every moment of your day. Whether you are walking, eating, or even washing dishes, bring your full attention to the task at hand. Notice the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, and the environment you are in. This practice helps to train the mind to stay present and to cultivate a deeper sense of peace and awareness. A real-life example: how mindfulness transformed fear. Consider the story of a man named Kavi, who struggled with intense anxiety about his career. He feared that he would fail, that he would not meet the expectations of others, and that his efforts would be in vain. This fear consumed him and prevented him from taking action. He would procrastinate, overthink every decision, and become paralyzed by doubt. Kavi decided to try mindfulness after hearing a Buddhist teacher speak about the power of being present. At first, he was skeptical, but he decided to practice mindful breathing whenever his fear of failure arose. Each time he felt overwhelmed by anxiety, he would stop, close his eyes, and focus on his breath. He would inhale deeply, hold the breath for a moment, and then exhale slowly. As he continued this practice, Kavi began to notice a shift. The intense fear that once consumed him began to subside. He realized that his fear was not based on any real danger, it was simply a thought, a projection of his mind. The more he practiced mindfulness, the less power his fears had over him. He started to take small steps toward his goals, not because he was fearless, but because he had learned to live with fear without letting it control him. Call to action: begin your mindfulness practice today. The practice of mindfulness is a transformative tool that can help you overcome fear and live a life of greater peace and clarity. I invite you to start today. Begin by taking a few moments each day to focus on your breath, to notice the sensations in your body, and to bring your awareness to the present moment. As you practice, remember that fear is not something to fight or resist, it is simply a passing thought. The more you practice mindfulness, the more you will begin to see fear for what it truly is, an illusion created by your mind. Ask yourself, what would it be like if you were free from fear? What would it feel like to live each moment fully, without the burden of past regrets or future worries? Through mindfulness, this freedom is within your reach. The path to overcoming fear is through the present moment, through the cultivation of awareness, compassion, and wisdom. So, take a deep breath and begin today. You have the power to transform your relationship with fear and to live with a greater sense of peace, presence, and clarity. Trust in the practice of mindfulness, and know that each moment you spend in awareness is a step closer to freedom. or understanding the nature of suffering, dukkha. In the teachings of Buddhism, one of the foundational concepts is dukkha, which refers to suffering or unsatisfactoriness inherent in human existence. The Buddha's deep insight into the nature of life and human suffering offers a profound framework that allows us to explore, understand, and transcend our fears. Fear is a form of suffering, one that arises when we grapple with the uncertainty of the future, the inevitable changes in our lives, and the fear of loss or failure. It is a form of mental and emotional discomfort that prevents us from experiencing peace. The Buddha's profound teachings on suffering remind us that fear, like all suffering, is universal. It is part of the human condition. At some point, everyone experiences fear. Whether it is the fear of failure, rejection, loss, or even death, it is something that we all share. Fear, in its many forms, is inextricably linked to our attachment to the transient and impermanent aspects of life. This attachment creates suffering because, as the Buddha taught, all things are temporary, and it is this very temporality that fuels our fear. Yet, by understanding that suffering is a natural part of existence, we are given the opportunity to address it with wisdom, compassion, and clarity. The nature of suffering, dukkha, as part of life. The Buddha taught that dukkha is an inherent part of life, not an anomaly or something that can be avoided. This is one of the key elements of the Four Noble Truths, where he explains that suffering is an undeniable truth of human existence. It is not just the physical pain or discomfort that we experience, but also the emotional and mental anguish that arises from our desires, attachments, and ignorance. The Buddha pointed out that even our most pleasant experiences are tinged with the potential for suffering, because they are impermanent, and we fear their loss. Fear is a manifestation of this deep existential suffering. It often arises from the mind's projections into the future or the past, fear of losing something we love, fear of something bad happening, or fear of our own inability to cope with future difficulties. But when we begin to examine these fears through the lens of Buddhism, we start to see them for what they truly are. Transient, passing mental states, born out of our attachments to things that are inherently impermanent. To understand suffering is to understand the nature of fear. Fear is not something that stands alone. It is intricately connected to the desires and attachments we have in life. We fear the unknown, because we are attached to the known. We fear losing something, because we are attached to the idea that what we have now is permanent. But in reality, all things are temporary, and this impermanence is at the very heart of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's insight, the universality of fear and suffering. When we encounter fear, it often feels deeply isolating. We may think that we are the only ones who struggle with it, that our fears are unique to us. But the Buddha's teachings remind us that fear is universal. It is not an isolated phenomenon. Everyone, regardless of their background, experiences fear in one form or another. This universal nature of fear can be incredibly relieving to understand. When we realize that fear is a part of the human experience, we can begin to soften its grip on us. It no longer feels like something that defines us personally, but rather something that we share with all beings. A profound story from the Buddha's teachings illustrates this point. One day, a traveler approached the Buddha with deep anxiety and fear about death. He was overwhelmed by the thought of mortality and the uncertainty that comes with it. He asked the Buddha, "Why must we face death? Why must we experience this fear of the inevitable?" The Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, responded, "Death is a part of life. It is the natural course of all beings. Everything that is born must eventually die. Fear of death arises when we forget that it is simply a part of the cycle. Just as birth is part of life, so too is death." The Buddha's response to the traveler's fear of death highlights the core insight of Buddhism. Everything is impermanent, and the fear we experience arises when we mistakenly cling to the belief that things, including our lives, are permanent. If we accept the impermanence of life and death, we are freed from the fear of mortality. When we begin to understand that life itself is transient, we become less attached to it and can embrace the natural flow of existence with greater peace and clarity. Understanding the connection between fear and attachment. The Buddhist teachings on attachment are key to understanding the relationship between fear and suffering. In Buddhism, attachment is seen as the root cause of much of our suffering. We attach ourselves to people, objects, outcomes, and even to our own identity. This attachment creates the illusion that we can control the impermanent, that we can hold onto something forever. But this is not the case. The Buddha taught that attachment to these things causes suffering because they are all subject to change. When we become attached to something, whether it is a loved one, a career, or even a concept of ourselves, we begin to fear losing it. This fear is a direct result of our attachment. It is the mind's grasping onto something that is fleeting, trying to make it permanent. But, as the Buddha repeatedly emphasized, nothing is permanent. The impermanence of life is one of the most important truths in Buddhism. And it is through understanding and accepting this truth that we can begin to release our fears. One of the greatest sources of fear is the fear of loss, the fear of losing something we love or depend on. This fear arises because we are attached to the idea that we must always have it. However, the Buddha's insight offers us a path out of this suffering. By realizing that everything is impermanent, including the things we fear losing, we can begin to let go of our attachment. This does not mean we stop loving or caring about things, but rather that we stop clinging to them as if they were permanent. This is the path to freedom from the fear of loss. Empathy and compassion, reducing the hold of fear. Understanding that suffering and fear are universal can also lead to greater empathy and compassion. When we realize that everyone experiences fear, we can begin to relate to others with greater understanding. This understanding allows us to move beyond our self-centered fear and develop compassion for those who are also struggling. The Buddhist teachings on compassion, karuna, emphasize the importance of recognizing the suffering of others and responding with kindness and understanding. Fear is a shared human experience, and when we understand this, we can begin to break down the barriers that separate us from one another. Rather than feeling isolated in our fear, we can cultivate a sense of connection and solidarity with others. In this way, understanding the nature of fear not only helps us overcome it but also deepens our connection to others. When we see that fear is part of the shared human condition, we no longer need to distance ourselves from others' suffering. Instead, we can approach them with compassion, knowing that their struggles are not so different from our own. This empathy helps us transcend the suffering created by fear and fosters a deeper sense of peace and interconnectedness. Embracing impermanence, a path to freedom from fear. At the heart of the Buddha's teachings on fear is the recognition that all things are impermanent. This includes not only external circumstances but also our thoughts, emotions, and fears. Just as the seasons change and the waves ebb and flow, our fears will rise and fall as well. When we begin to accept this fundamental truth, we start to release the power that fear has over us. The Buddha taught that by embracing impermanence, we can free ourselves from the grip of attachment and fear. When we realize that nothing lasts forever, including our fears, we can face them with equanimity and peace. This does not mean we stop feeling fear, but rather that we stop letting it control us. We learn to observe it, acknowledge it, and then let it go. Practical steps to overcoming fear through understanding suffering. 1. Practice mindful awareness. Begin by becoming aware of your fears without judgment. Observe them as they arise, without trying to push them away or hold on to them. Recognize that they are transient and will eventually pass. By observing fear in this way, you create distance from it and reduce its power over you. 2. Reflect on impermanence. Regularly remind yourself of the impermanence of all things. Reflect on the transient nature of your fears, your possessions, your relationships, and your very life. This understanding can help you release your attachment to the things you fear losing. 3. Cultivate compassion. When you feel fear, take a moment to reflect on the fact that all beings experience fear. Recognize that you are not alone in your suffering. This recognition can help you develop empathy for others and reduce the isolation that fear often brings. 4. Let go of attachment. Take small steps each day to let go of your attachment to outcomes, possessions, and even your sense of self. The more you practice non-attachment, the less fear you will experience. Call to action. Free yourself from fear. As you reflect on the Buddhist teachings, I invite you to take action. Begin by embracing the impermanence of life and recognizing that fear, like all things, is temporary. When fear arises, pause and reflect on the fact that it is not a permanent part of your existence. It is simply a passing thought, a fleeting sensation. By understanding the nature of suffering and fear, you can begin to free yourself from their grip. You have the power to release your attachments, to live with greater compassion and understanding, and to embrace life with peace and equanimity. Take the first step today. Observe your fears, accept their impermanence, and let them go. The path to freedom from fear begins with a recognition that fear is not a permanent part of you, but a passing experience. Embrace this truth, and you will find the strength to live with greater peace and clarity. Be letting go of attachment, tanha, embracing freedom from suffering. In the core of Buddhist teachings, there is a deep and powerful truth that Buddha shared with his followers. Attachment is the root cause of much of our suffering. It is the clinging to people, possessions, outcomes, and even ideas, which binds us in chains of insecurity and fear. This attachment, while often subtle, is the source of much of the unrest and anxiety that clouds our peace. We become attached to people, to objects, to expectations, and in doing so, we create an internal struggle that ultimately leads to our suffering. When we fear losing something that we are attached to, whether it be a loved one, a job, a material possession, or even our sense of self, we fall into fear, anxiety, and sadness. Buddhism teaches us that the only way to truly transcend this suffering is to let go of attachment. This doesn't mean that we stop caring about the things that matter to us, or that we stop investing in relationships, work, or goals. What it means is that we stop allowing these things to define us, to control our happiness and sense of security. When we learn the art of non-attachment, we develop a sense of inner peace that remains undisturbed, no matter what the outside world throws at us. Attachment to the material world, to people, or to our ideas of success, keeps us trapped in a cycle of longing and dissatisfaction. We believe that our happiness depends on the acquisition of things or the approval of others. But in truth, these are fleeting, impermanent experiences. The very nature of life is change, and in accepting this, we free ourselves from the shackles of attachment. In the space between attachment and non-attachment, there is peace, stillness, and freedom. The teachings of the Buddha on attachment, tanha. The Buddha spoke extensively about attachment and its detrimental effects on the mind. He described attachment as a form of craving or clinging, tanha in Pali, which literally means thirst. This thirst or craving arises from our deep desire to hold on to things, to preserve them, and to make them last forever. But as the Buddha pointed out, nothing in life is permanent. All things change, grow, and eventually fade. Our bodies, our relationships, our possessions, all are subject to decay. One of the Buddha's key teachings is that attachment is one of the three poisons, kleshas, along with aversion and ignorance, that poison the mind and keep us locked in the cycle of suffering. These attachments cloud our judgment and prevent us from seeing the impermanence of life clearly. We cling to what we have, whether it be material possessions, a loved one's affection, or our own identity. But in doing so, we inadvertently cause ourselves suffering. The Buddhist teachings guide us to understand that the path to freedom lies not in the accumulation of more, but in the letting go of what no longer serves us. In the Buddhist view, attachment is not simply about holding on to physical objects or relationships, but also to ideas, beliefs, and expectations. We attach ourselves to the idea of who we are and how life should unfold, but the reality is that life is unpredictable, ever-changing, and beyond our control. Letting go of attachment means releasing the need for things to be a certain way, for life to go according to our plan. It is a radical act of surrender and acceptance. The fear of loss, how attachment fuels our anxiety. Attachment is the root of fear. Fear arises when we become aware of the possibility of losing what we are attached to. The fear of losing our job, our relationships, or even our health can paralyze us with anxiety and stress. But this fear is based on the illusion that we can hold on to these things forever. In reality, everything is subject to change. The Buddha taught that by clinging to things, we create a false sense of security. When we lose those things, as inevitably happens in life, we are thrown into chaos and suffering. The key to overcoming this fear is recognizing the impermanence of all things. When we understand that nothing lasts forever, we begin to relax our grip. The very things we fear losing are not ours to keep. They come into our lives for a time and then they leave. This awareness of impermanence frees us from the suffering caused by attachment. We begin to live more fully, appreciating what we have in the present moment without fear of its eventual loss. In the Buddhist tradition, the practice of mindfulness is a powerful tool for overcoming attachment. By being fully present in each moment, we learn to experience life as it is, without clinging to any particular outcome or expectation. When we practice mindfulness, we notice our thoughts and emotions arising and passing away, like clouds in the sky. We don't hold on to them, we allow them to move through us. This practice helps us recognize the transient nature of all things, and it cultivates a sense of inner peace and equanimity. The power of non-attachment. Stories from Buddhist teachings. In Buddhist teachings, there are many stories that illustrate the profound wisdom of non-attachment. One such story is that of a monk who had spent years meditating in solitude, living a simple life in the forest. This monk had found deep peace through his practice of meditation and detachment from worldly concerns. He was content with his life and had little desire for material possessions or recognition. One day, a group of thieves came to the monk's humble dwelling and stole everything he owned: his robes, his meditation cushion, his simple bowl. The monk, instead of reacting with anger, frustration, or despair, calmly sat down and smiled. He said, "These things were never truly mine to begin with. I only borrowed them for a time." In this moment, the monk's lack of attachment to material possessions allowed him to remain completely unaffected by the loss. This story exemplifies the profound wisdom of non-attachment. The monk's peace was not dependent on his possessions. His happiness did not come from the things he owned or the recognition of others, but from his inner contentment and acceptance of life as it is. In the face of loss, he was unshaken, for he understood that the things he had were not permanent and did not define his sense of self or his happiness. The lesson here is clear: when we practice non-attachment, we cultivate an inner strength that allows us to face the inevitable changes of life with equanimity. We no longer allow the external world to dictate our internal peace. We are no longer bound by our attachments to people, possessions, or ideas. Instead, we find freedom in the present moment, embracing life as it comes, without fear or expectation. Non-attachment and the path to freedom. The path to freedom from attachment begins with mindfulness and self-awareness. As we become more aware of our attachments, we begin to notice how they shape our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. we start to see how much of our anxiety and suffering is tied to our desire to hold on to things, to control outcomes, and to secure our happiness through external circumstances. To begin the practice of letting go of attachment, we must first recognize our attachments. What are you holding on to? Is it a person, a job, a material possession, or even an idea of yourself? How does this attachment influence your thoughts, actions, and emotions? When you start to observe these attachments with mindfulness, you will see how they create fear and anxiety in your life. The next step is to gradually loosen your grip. This is not about rejecting the things you care about, but rather, it is about releasing the need for them to define your happiness or sense of security. Allow yourself to enjoy your relationships, your work, and your possessions, but without clinging to them. Understand that they are temporary, and that true peace comes from within, not from the outside world. In Buddhist practice, meditation is an essential tool for letting go of attachment. Meditation allows us to observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming attached to them. As we sit in stillness, we notice how our thoughts arise and pass away, just as clouds move across the sky. We do not hold on to any one thought, we simply let it go. This practice of letting go in meditation can be extended to our daily lives. When attachment arises, we can simply observe it and release it, knowing that our true happiness lies in the present moment, free from the need to possess or control. Living the teachings of non-attachment. Practical steps. 1. Practice mindfulness. Begin by practicing mindfulness in your daily life. Pay attention to your thoughts, emotions, and attachments. Notice when you are clinging to something, whether it is an object, a person, or an outcome, and practice letting go. Bring yourself back to the present moment, focusing on your breath, your surroundings, and your inner peace. 2. Reflect on impermanence. Regularly remind yourself of the impermanent nature of all things. Reflect on the fact that everything, from your possessions to your relationships, is subject to change. This understanding can help you release your attachment to things and embrace life as it is, without fear of loss. 3. Cultivate non-attachment. When attachment arises, take a step back and observe it. Acknowledge the attachment, but do not allow it to control you. Practice non-attachment by enjoying experiences without clinging to them. Allow yourself to appreciate the present moment without the need to hold on to it. 4. Surrender control. Let go of the need to control outcomes or circumstances. Recognize that life is unpredictable, and that true peace comes from accepting life as it is, without trying to force it to conform to your desires. Surrendering control allows you to experience the freedom of non-attachment. Call to action. Begin your journey of letting go. As you reflect on the teachings of non-attachment, I invite you to begin your own journey of letting go. Start by observing your attachments, noticing when you are clinging to something or someone. Practice mindfulness and allow yourself to let go of the need to control or possess. Recognize that true happiness lies not in what you have, but in your ability to embrace the present moment without attachment. The path to freedom is through non-attachment. By letting go of your need to possess or control, you create space for peace, joy, and equanimity in your life. Embrace the impermanence of all things, and find the freedom that comes with releasing attachment. The more you practice, the more you will experience the peace and freedom that come from living without fear, without clinging, and without attachment. Begin today, and let go of what no longer serves you. Let peace be your true possession. 6. Cultivating patience. Kanti, the key to overcoming fear. Patience, known as Kanti in Pali, is an essential virtue in Buddhist practice and one that offers the profound path toward overcoming fear and anxiety. In our fast-paced world, where instant gratification is often expected, patience can seem like a foreign concept, yet it is precisely what allows us to remain calm amidst life's challenges. Fear, in many ways, is born from impatience, our inability to wait for outcomes, to trust the process of life, and to embrace uncertainty with grace. Buddha taught that impatience feeds suffering, while patience is the antidote to the restlessness and anxiety that arises from our attachment to control and certainty. To understand the value of patience, it's important to recognize that it's not simply about waiting. It's about how we approach life's inevitable delays and uncertainties. How do we respond when things don't unfold the way we expect? How do we react when fear and discomfort arise? The Buddhist teachings provide us with powerful tools to cultivate patience, transforming our relationship with fear and allowing us to face life's challenges with clarity, wisdom, and equanimity. The link between fear and impatience. Fear often emerges when we are confronted with uncertainty. We worry about the future, the unknown, and what might happen next. In our modern society, we are conditioned to expect quick answers, fast results, and immediate relief. When things don't happen quickly enough, we become frustrated, anxious, and fearful. This impatience creates a mental environment ripe for fear to take root. Impatience is driven by the need for certainty and control. We want to know what will happen next, and when we don't have that clarity, fear begins to cloud our minds. The fear of the unknown, the fear of what might happen if we don't take control, or the fear of waiting too long can overwhelm us. It is in these moments that cultivating patience becomes vital. Buddhism teaches that patience is not the same as passivity or resignation. Rather, it is the ability to accept the flow of life as it unfolds without rushing or forcing things to happen. When we cultivate patience, we begin to trust that everything has its time, and we stop the endless mental chatter that fuels our fear. We allow ourselves to be present in the moment, to face discomfort without running from it, and to accept life as it is. The Buddhist view of patience, Khanti. In Buddhist philosophy, patience Khanti is a form of mental discipline and spiritual maturity. It is not merely the ability to wait, but the ability to do so with equanimity, without becoming frustrated, angry, or fearful. Patience involves understanding that everything is impermanent, that everything will unfold in its own time. This perspective helps us release the need to control outcomes and to accept life's inherent uncertainty with peace. The Buddha spoke of 3 kinds of patience. 1. Patience in the face of suffering. This refers to the ability to endure hardship without reacting negatively. When we face difficult circumstances, whether physical pain, emotional distress, or the difficulties of life, patience allows us to accept and bear it without giving in to frustration or anger. 2. Patience in the face of the actions of others. This type of patience involves not reacting to the negative behavior of others. When others insult us, criticize us, or act in ways that disturb us, patience teaches us to respond with understanding and kindness rather than retaliation. 3. Patience in the face of the Dharma. This refers to the patience required in following the path of enlightenment. The path to wisdom and awakening is long and often filled with obstacles. But patience is needed to persevere, knowing that the fruits of practice will come in time. Buddhist teachings on patience provide a profound way to approach life's challenges, and they offer a path to overcoming fear. Fear arises when we feel that we must control or escape from discomfort. But when we practice patience, we learn to face discomfort with acceptance and equanimity. In doing so, we become free from the fear that arises from impatience and the desire for control. The example of the traveler and the train. One of the Buddhist teachings on patience is illustrated in a story about a traveler who was waiting for a long-anticipated train. The man had been waiting for hours, and the train had not yet arrived. As the minutes turned into hours, he grew increasingly frustrated. He paced back and forth, checked his watch repeatedly, and even muttered to himself about the delay. He wanted the train to come right now. His impatience grew as the waiting stretched on. Finally, after many hours of frustration, the man realized that no amount of rushing, worrying, or becoming upset would make the train arrive any faster. The train would come when it came, and there was nothing he could do to control that. At that moment, he decided to stop his worrying and accept the situation as it was. He sat down, took a deep breath, and found peace in the acceptance of the delay. This story encapsulates the essence of patience. The man's impatience caused him suffering. But once he accepted the situation, he found peace. The train, which was always going to arrive at its appointed time, did not change its course because of the man's frustration. Similarly, in our lives, the things we cannot control, whether it's the timing of events, the actions of others, or the uncertainties of the future, are not altered by our impatience. The practice of patience teaches us to stop resisting what is beyond our control and to embrace the present moment with calmness and wisdom. The practice of patience, a path to overcoming fear. Patience, in the Buddhist sense, is not just the ability to wait passively, but the ability to endure life's challenges with grace. Fear often arises when we try to avoid discomfort, when we resist what is happening in the present moment. When we feel afraid, it is often because we are running from something or trying to control an outcome. Patience teaches us to stop running and to simply be with the discomfort, trusting that it will pass. To cultivate patience, we must begin by accepting the impermanence of all things. Nothing lasts forever, neither our joys nor our sorrows. When we face a difficult situation, it is important to remind ourselves that the discomfort we are feeling is temporary. The Buddhist teachings on impermanence help us put our fears in perspective. Just as our pain and suffering arise, they will also pass. The key is to remain present with the discomfort without reacting to it. Another important aspect of cultivating patience is mindfulness. By practicing mindfulness, we bring our full attention to the present moment. When fear or discomfort arises, mindfulness allows us to observe it without judgment or resistance. We simply acknowledge it and let it pass. In this way, mindfulness and patience work hand in hand. Mindfulness teaches us to be aware of our thoughts and emotions without being attached to them, while patience allows us to endure them without reacting impulsively. The Buddha's teaching on overcoming fear with patience. The Buddha often spoke about how patience can help us overcome fear. Fear arises when we anticipate something bad happening in the future or when we try to avoid discomfort. Patience teaches us to be present in the moment and to accept things as they are. When we are patient, we are able to face fear with equanimity and clarity. One of the key practices that can help us overcome fear through patience is the development of virya, effort, which is the energy required to stay committed to the practice, even when things are difficult. Patience is a form of sustained effort. We must practice patience not just in moments of calm, but in times of fear, anxiety, and discomfort. This patience is what enables us to persevere through life's challenges with resilience and grace. The Buddha also taught that fear often arises from our attachment to the idea of control. When we believe that we must control everything around us, we create anxiety and fear. Patience helps us relinquish the need to control every situation. It teaches us to trust the process of life and to allow things to unfold in their own time. When we practice patience, we stop forcing life to happen according to our desires and begin to accept what comes with an open heart. Practical ways to cultivate patience. 1. Mindfulness meditation. The practice of mindfulness meditation is one of the most effective ways to cultivate patience. By sitting quietly and focusing on the breath, you begin to develop awareness of the present moment. When thoughts, emotions, or sensations arise, you can observe them without judgment. This practice helps you cultivate patience by training your mind to accept discomfort and uncertainty without reacting to it. 2. Acceptance of impermanence. Remind yourself regularly that everything in life is impermanent. When you feel discomfort or fear, recognize that it will not last forever. This understanding allows you to practice patience in the face of uncertainty. 3. Cultivating compassion. Patience is deeply connected to compassion. When we practice patience, we are not only accepting our own difficulties, but we are also learning to accept the difficulties of others. By practicing compassion for yourself and others, you can create a sense of calm in the midst of life's challenges. 4. Mindful breathing. When impatience or fear arises, take a deep breath and focus on the sensations of the breath moving in and out of your body. This simple act of mindful breathing helps to calm the mind and return to the present moment. Trust the process. Remind yourself that life unfolds in its own time. We cannot rush the process of growth, healing, or change. Trust that things will unfold as they are meant to, and allow yourself to be patient with the journey. Call to action. Begin your journey of patience. As you reflect on the Buddhist teachings, I encourage you to begin practicing patience in your own life. When fear, frustration, or anxiety arise, take a moment to pause and breathe. Recognize that impatience only fuels your suffering, while patience offers a way out. Trust the process of life, knowing that everything is impermanent, and that your discomfort will pass. By cultivating patience, you will learn to face challenges with calmness and wisdom, transforming your relationship with fear and uncertainty. Start today. The next time you face a difficult situation or feel overwhelmed by fear, practice patience. Take a deep breath, observe your thoughts, and allow yourself to simply be in the present moment. With each step, you will move closer to the peace and freedom that come from cultivating patience and letting go of the need for control. Remember, patience is not about waiting for something to happen, it is about trusting that all things will unfold in their own time. Embrace patience, and let it guide you to a place of inner peace and wisdom. As we reach the end of today's journey into the profound teachings of Buddhism, we are reminded of one simple yet transformative truth: fear, like all things in life, is not meant to be fought against or resisted, but understood, observed, and transcended. The teachings of mindfulness, impermanence, non-attachment, and patience provide us with the wisdom we need to break free from the chains of fear that often hold us back, preventing us from living our lives to the fullest. Fear is an intrinsic part of the human experience, but it doesn't have to rule over us. When we integrate Buddhist practices into our daily lives, we shift our perspective on fear. We no longer see it as an enemy or an obstacle to be overcome. Instead, we begin to see it as an opportunity for growth, a chance to cultivate mindfulness, and a path to greater wisdom and peace. By embracing mindfulness, we bring our attention to the present moment. We stop dwelling on the past or fearing the future, allowing us to see that the fear we often experience is based on mental projections rather than reality. Mindfulness helps us observe our fear without judgment, allowing us to remain calm in the face of uncertainty. The acceptance of impermanence, the understanding that everything in life is constantly changing, frees us from the grip of fear. We recognize that no emotion, no experience, no situation, whether good or bad, lasts forever. When we realize that everything is temporary, we can approach fear with a sense of ease, knowing that it will pass just as other emotions do. Non-attachment, another central principle of Buddhist teachings, teaches us to release our dependence on external circumstances for our happiness. When we are attached to outcomes, possessions, or even the approval of others, we create a fertile ground for fear to grow. But when we practice non-attachment, we let go of the need to control everything, allowing us to navigate life with greater freedom and peace. Patience, or Kanti, is the final piece of the puzzle. Fear often arises when we become impatient with the uncertainty of life, when we crave immediate solutions or quick fixes. By cultivating patience, we learn to accept life as it unfolds, with all its unpredictability and impermanence. Patience enables us to endure discomfort without reacting impulsively, helping us to face our fears with a calm and steady mind. These teachings are not just abstract ideas, they are practices we can apply in our daily lives. They empower us to approach fear not as a threat, but as a teacher, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As we apply these practices, we not only transform our own relationship with fear, but we also inspire others to do the same. We create a ripple effect, encouraging those around us to cultivate calmness, resilience, and inner freedom. But how do we start? The key is to take it one step at a time. Begin by practicing mindfulness in the small moments of your day. Notice when fear arises and take a deep breath. Observe it without judgment, knowing that it is just a passing thought. Reflect on the impermanence of your experiences, recognizing that no situation, no emotion, lasts forever. Practice non-attachment by letting go of the need to control outcomes and trusting the process of life. And above all, cultivate patience, allowing yourself the space to grow, to learn, and to face life's challenges with calmness. Remember, this is not a journey that happens overnight. It's a process, a lifelong practice. But with each step you take, you will find that fear loses its power over you, and peace, courage, and wisdom begin to emerge in their place. Now, if today's video has resonated with you and you feel inspired to take the first steps toward overcoming fear, I invite you to share this video with others who may benefit from these teachings. Together, we can create a community of people who are learning to live with greater calmness and clarity. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful. And consider subscribing to our channel, Buddhist Stories, for more content that explores how Buddhist wisdom can help you navigate life's challenges with ease and understanding. As we move forward, let's remember that the teachings of Buddhism are not just to be studied, they are to be lived. Fear will always be a part of life, but it doesn't have to control us. With mindfulness, acceptance, non-attachment, and patience, we can transcend fear and embrace a life of true freedom. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll explore another powerful Buddhist teaching that can help you transform your life in ways you never imagined. The journey doesn't end here, there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more peace to discover. Let's continue this journey together, one step at a time, towards the life we truly deserve.